Okay, hello Tech 400. This is Prof. Braden Evans coming at you. Hope everybody's doing well. Today's recorded lecture will focus on a variety of topics. We'll be covering the audience, the writing process, the tone and the approach, as well as something we love, something we sort of don't love sometimes. We'll be talking about email. We all have a love-hate relationship with email, I think. All right, so let's get right into it. Something that is going to recur throughout this course is that your audience as a technical communicator is so important, okay? It's really important that you understand the context, who your audience is, what sort of background they have, and you need to understand what they want. Because for them to appreciate what you have to say, you need to convince them that there's something valuable for them in listening to you, okay? So to be sort of a successful, effective technical communicator, you want to anticipate, right? Anticipate some questions and interests from your communication. All right. When we think about communication, mediums, different ways of communicating, um, we can compare written versus oral communication. And of course, like anything else, there are advantages and disadvantages to both. So when we have written communication, well, there's a permanent record. And you may notice that's in the advantages and disadvantages column, right? Because if you think of it, when you put something in writing, we always say, be so careful what you put in writing, right? Maybe if someone promised you something and they go to deny it after the fact, you're glad, right? You're glad that it's in writing because you can pull up the email and say, hey, look, you promised me a discount, whatever that may be, right? Disadvantage, if you make a mistake and share company secrets by email with a competitor, right? By accident, you send it to the wrong email address. Oof, there's a permanent record of that too. So you really need to explain yourself, right? Why is this email here showing that you shared company secrets? So it's a good thing and a bad thing, right? It can be effective and efficient. You can communicate to like a very broad audience of people, and something like email, which we'll talk about later, it can be delivered either sort of in real time or at the receiver's convenience, right? So different advantages there. It also takes a little more time sometimes, which can be a disadvantage because you got to sort of look over what you're writing. Oral communication, easy, efficient, right? Spoken words are sort of rich in context, right? People can hear the tone of your voice. They can hear sort of your approach and attitude. Sometimes you can sort of miscommunicate in an oral communication context and not really get the message across that you're trying to. So again, advantages and disadvantages to both. Okay, we're going to talk a little bit about the process of writing. Okay, and there's these three major stages. We've got the planning, the drafting, and the rewriting stage. And when I'm talking about rewriting, I'm talking about revising, editing, and proofreading, right? And so, it's not black and white, right? Writing is complex, and there's no like actual correct way to write all of your communications, right? Obviously, there's grammatical correctness, right? But there's different ways that you can approach things. Um, the key though is to really knowing your topic, your subject, really being comfortable with what you are communicating. Like our friend Einstein says, if you can't communicate it simply, you don't know it well enough, right? And then, of course, understanding your audience, so understanding the context for framing your communication appropriately. Here's something that surprises students sometimes. I say, what do you think? What do you think is the sort of allocation of the hours, of the time it would take to prepare our writings, right? And most students will say, well, obviously it's the writing part that takes up the most time, right? And actually, you can kind of sort of split it three ways. You should think about sort of planning your writing as like 1/3 of your time, the actual writing is 1/3 of your time, and then the rewriting, right, as 1/3 of your time. Okay, so you look at this little pie chart here. Here's our planning phase, right? Analyzing the audience. What's the purpose? Get some info, do your research, right? Then actually composing the draft. That's the writing. And then 1/3 for revising and editing. This is something that I think sometimes as students, we come to underestimate or under deliver on that piece of it because you're so busy, you're doing so many things. We don't always take the time, the appropriate amount of time to revise and edit things, right? But it's so important to get your message across, cleanly in the way that you want it to. In terms of preparation, there's a lot of different things you can do. You can brainstorm. You can do what's called free writing, where you just start writing, even if you don't have all your ideas down, you just start writing ideas and things kind of develop. Cluster writing, so writing in bunches. Doing some research by talking to the audience. What do you want to get out of my presentation or my communication, right? Creating outlines, very important. So having like a skeleton, to kind of build your writings around. Sometimes we storyboard, especially for presentations. And you guys, I know you do this all the time, use collaborative software, right? So Google Docs and shared documents to help you work as a team. Okay, so revision, we're going to spend a bit of time on this stuff. So on the sort of rewriting piece, which is, revising and editing and proofreading and so on, okay? Because it's important. So this is trying to take yourself out of your shoes as the writer and view your document as a reader, right? Put yourself in your reader's shoes, okay? So there's different ways to do that. One way is to ask a friend, right? Ask a friend if you have a friend who's got some time on their hands, what a wonderful way they can contribute to your education by, giving you some feedback on your writings that they've read, right? And also give yourself enough time that you can revise your draft several times, right? This is, I think, a piece where we all struggle. Even I do, right? I'm a prof and I'm last minute on a lot of things too. It's human nature. We're always kind of working on competing timelines. We have different things taking up our time, but the more time we can give ourselves to revise, the better. And we should make use of that time by revising several times, okay? Read things with fresh eyes. So don't finish writing and then start reading it over. Like if you finish writing, sleep on it. Give yourself a night to sleep and the next day look at it, okay? Make sure you read things from start to finish, and then you've got to do some editing as well, right? So what's the difference, right? What's revising versus editing? Well, this is making like sort of the superficial changes, right? Editing, grammar, spelling, punctuation, right? Making sure the context is appropriate, right? So you can edit sort of for correctness, right? Making sure all your grammar is good and no spelling errors, that kind of thing. So that's where our, like our grammar check and spell check type tools come in quite handy, right? Can be very useful. But then there's editing for readability, right? So maybe your document is grammatically correct, but doesn't really communicate your point as well as it could for your audience. So trying to adjust and adapt to that, making sure you prepare it for your audience. Okay, so what does a grammar checker do? It's a useful tool. You should use it, right? But you really do need to sort of look things over yourself. You can't just rely on your grammar checker for everything, right? Sometimes things don't read the way we intend them to, right? So you're trying to say something, but it doesn't come across very clearly, okay? So make sure that you go beyond just using your spell check, your grammar check. That's only going to give you the very basics, right, when it comes to editing. Then the other piece of rewriting is proofreading. So we revise, we edit, and then we proofread, right? So this is really sort of like reading this thing out loud. Some people read their words in reverse order. So they'll read like sentences backwards, all right, to see if they're catching any spelling errors, because we lose our focus, we lose our concentration sometimes just kind of reading silently. It's nice to approach it in paragraphs or in chapters, right? Not try to do it all at once, because again, you lose your focus. You know, out of sequence, same idea as reading it backwards, right? Don't just follow along in the story. Ask a friend to read it out loud. Double check. This is a big one, like double check, especially in technical comms. We refer to data, we refer to statistics, we refer to all kinds of numbers, right? So double check that stuff. Sometimes it can look silly if you say, you know, so such and such scientist was born in 1911, right? And then you say, oh, and in 1642 she discovered, you know, this big breakthrough. Well, this is supposed to be 1942, right? So it seems silly. So just, you know, those are small errors that can make your document kind of silly, right? Okay, so make sure you allocate enough time for your rewriting process. All right. Now we'll talk a little bit about positive messaging and the concept of reader benefits. Okay. So we're gonna have different message types that we'll talk about today. Okay. So positive messages, those are fun, right? Those are fun to write because you know that it's going to be well received by your audience, right? It's, you know, the idea is to give the reader some good news. So you're sending an email out to your, I don't know, your office mates, your friends on your team, and you say, hey, don't bring lunch tomorrow. My uncle just made a big batch of samosas and I'm going to bring them for everybody, right? That's good news. Everybody's happy for that. So this is positive messaging, right? It's easy to to send that message. You can be very direct. There's nothing complicated about it. You know, everybody's going to receive it well, right? And so, you know, pretty simple messaging on in terms of like the primary objective, right? One thing to keep in mind though is there are some secondary intentions, right? So if you're in an office setting, you know, there's a certain formality you want to use, right? So you don't want to go Yahoo, let's party. You know, you got to keep it kind of professional as well, right? So make sure that, you know, you're delivering that positive message, but you're sort of maintaining, you know, all of your real intentions there in terms of being a professional. Okay, so in some areas, especially in sort of in the insurance field, right, we're making adjustments and we're responding to complaints sometimes, right? And positive messages can really help, you know, maintaining our good sort of relationships with our clients, right? Um, so so you can be very direct here. If you're responding favorably, someone makes an insurance claim and you say, yep, everything's legitimate, they're going to get their money, right? So you come right out and say, um, yes, you know, Sandra, absolutely, your claim will be approved. Okay, so you start out with the good news. So right away, Sandra is in a good mood, right? Oh, okay, my insurance company's taking care of me. All right. You don't have to go into all the details, right? Because you're giving her the answer that she wants. So you don't have to say, well, we had our claims adjusters look at it and we did an investigation into the accident. You don't need all that, right? If there was like a mistake that was made, you know, you can explain that away, but make sure it reflects favorably on the company. So apologies for the delay. You know, we had a power outage, a delay in treating your claim. We had a power outage, but we prioritized, you know, clients like you, something like that. Only if you can make yourself, you know, not make yourself look bad, would you get into any sort of disclaimer like that. Okay. So the organization of these messages. So first of all, you think about what your audience wants. Again, audience keeps coming up, right? Put the good news and sort of a summary first, right? And then explain as necessary, right? So you start out, hey, congratulations, you got $1,000 bonus this year, right? That's a piece of good news that is very happy to announce. Say, you know, summarize the details. So it'll be part of your December paycheck and you can use that money however you like, okay? You might give some explanation. The reason we've given these bonuses This year is because the company was profitable and we were able to redistribute some of our earnings, right? If there's a negative element, right, you want to spin it positively. So something like maybe that bonus will be taxed at a higher rate, right? So that's a negative element. So you might say, well, unfortunately, bonuses are taxed more heavily. However, you can protect that bonus by investing in an RSP or putting it deferring it to January when you'll be taxed at a lower rate. So there's different ways to spin any negative piece. It's still a piece of good news, right? Explain the reader benefit. This is why it's so great to be a part of this team, because we make sure to reward our employees when we have the earnings to support it, and some kind of goodwill ending, right? And something that's forward looking. What a terrific year 2022 was. Looking forward to another excellent year in 2023. Okay, something like that. Okay, so here's your kind of your model, your template for building a positive message. The main point, come right out and say, give the good news, explain any necessary details. If there's any negative element to it, okay, that comes after, right? You give some explanation of it. Make sure you let the reader know what's in it for them, their benefits, and then a good positive sign off. Okay, that's the structure of a positive message. Okay. Reader benefits are important when you potentially convincing someone to do something, right? So if you're, I don't know, presenting a new policy, everybody's got to wear dress shoes to the office from now on, right? That's that's not necessarily good news, right? That's something that some people will resist, right? So you got to shape their attitudes a little bit. You say, look, the reason we're doing it is because we're going to have more vice presidents coming through the office in the next year. And that's a great advantage for you because you'll get some exposure to senior management people who, potentially could help you promote you in your career. Okay. So now it makes sense. Oh, okay. I better wear my good shoes because I might meet an interesting vice president who will sit down and talk with me about opportunities in the company. Okay. So that's important to really sort of spin the communication in a way that, hey, there's something in it for the reader, right? There is a benefit for the reader, okay? And then if there was a reader that was thinking that wearing dress shoes to the office was not a good thing, maybe they changed their mind a little bit. They said, oh, okay, it makes sense. There's a good benefit to it, okay? All right. Okay, when do you not need reader benefits? Well, if you're just presenting facts, right? Let's see. What would be like a basic fact that you might be communicating? How about the HR office is moving from the second floor hallway to the corner unit in the second floor, right? This is not good news. It's not bad news. This is just some information for people, right? You don't need to say, ooh, it'll save you 13 steps if you work in the west wing of the building, right? You don't have to sell every idea, because then it loses the whole notion of selling your ideas, sort of loses its effectiveness, right? Just state the facts, okay? So don't overkill with reader benefits when they're not required. But anytime you want to make sure you're convincing people to do anything, you can really sort of drive those benefits home, okay? Okay, now what about the subject line? Oof, sometimes we underestimate this, right? The value and importance of a good subject line in an email, let's say, right? Well, you should really, and I'm talking about the context of a positive message, right? Should really focus on the main idea. So if it's about the bonus, right? Your annual bonus, right? Because it's a good, it's a good news on the bonus. You're getting $1,000, to spend how you want. Put it right there in the subject line. Okay. So you're selling your message with your subject line, right? Your goal is to convince your reader to read your email, right? And also remember that people file their emails, right? Because we get such a huge volume of them now. So when you want to go look up, oh yeah, what was my bonus? What was the details of my bonus again? Like 6 months later, it's got to be easy to find, easy to retrieve. So having a very relevant subject line, right, that is focused on the main point of the email you're writing, that'll make it easier to file and retrieve in the future. Okay, so make sure your subject line is short and to the point, right? Very specific and matches the content of the message. Okay, so that was positive messaging. Now we're going to switch gears and talk about negative messaging. Okay, so this is a whole other thing, right? When we're delivering a negative message, we need to take a really different approach. Okay, so obviously your primary goal is to deliver the bad news, right? So that it's clear and understood and accepted by the reader, while also maintaining goodwill, right? You don't want them to hate you after the message. so you want to get the bad news across in as positive a way as possible, right? Okay. So the secondary objectives in all of this is that, you want to make sure readers feel like they're being taken seriously, right? You have a reasonable approach to things, that you're not treating them unfairly, right? And that really, when it comes to bad news, you hope that people read it and say, okay, I probably would have done the same thing if I was in, your shoes, right? Because that makes it much easier to accept and understand, right? Another important point is that, like, you don't want a lot of back and forth, right? So if you're giving bad news, you want it to be clear, and you want the reader not to have to email you back 3, 4, 5 times with more explanations, right? You want to just move on from it, right? So make sure the message is complete. Okay, so there's a very different approach to this. Remember, with positive messages, we came right out and gave the good news first, right? That's not the case this time. Now our structure is to have a buffer. This is like a neutral statement to just introduce the conversation. Then you're going to give an explanation for the bad news you're about to deliver, and then you give the bad news. Okay, so that's the third step, is actually delivering the bad news. Okay, if there's any sort of compromise or alternative available, you present it afterwards, and then really try to close positively to maintain, goodwill, right? Good relationship. Okay, so it's very different. In this case, you're building up to the negative message, whereas with a positive message, you're coming right out and saying it up front. So we start with the buffer, very neutral, if possible, positive statement, right? Put the reader in a good, decent frame of mind before getting the bad news, right? You don't want to mislead them, right? You don't want to be sort of acting as though this is going to be a very positive message and then deliver the bad news, right? But some kind of opening message to familiarize the reader with you, your intentions, always a good thing. Okay. And then you're going to explain the bad news before you give it. Okay. So you're going to make it super clear before even saying what it is. Okay. And so you want your reasons to be really kind of solid and logical, right? Don't just say, I wish it wasn't like this, but it's the company policy that made me do it, right? No, you got to own the decision. If you made a decision that will impact this person with some negative news, you only say, look, this is what I had to do, and here's why, right? Okay, try to avoid my hands are tied, I can't do anything about it. You just come out with the bad news, or with the explanation. I made this decision because it's in the best interest of our department and the company. Finished, right? So if you own it, then someone's not going to come back and say, oh, well, I want to talk to your supervisor, I want to talk to your boss and see if I can convince them. No, it's your decision, right? So make sure that you're giving your explanation, and make sure that you're owning it. So, for example, let's say, I don't know, you're my friend, and you wanted to borrow my car, right? And so I'm going to tell you, no, I don't want you. I think I think it's a risk to my car if I lend you my car. So, I'm going to tell you no, right? So as I build up, as I give my explanation, I might say, start with a buffer, right? Like, hey, Sam, great to hear from you the other day. It was nice running into you and your family. Um, with insurance costs the way they are, I've only got very basic insurance on my car. It's all I can afford right now. And so, unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to lend you my car for the weekend, right? Because I'm not going to have the adequate insurance coverage. Okay. So something like that, where you give the explanation, you make it clear it's your decision, right? And your answer is final, right? So they're not going to come back and, oh, come on, we could, we could work something out or whatever. No, if you say it's your decision, then there's no coming back from that, right? Which is good. So you make the negative statement once and you make it clear, right? So unfortunately, I've decided that I cannot lend you, I will not lend you my vehicle, right? Okay. And so, you've really kind of made your point, you've made it clear. And your point is to kind of end that conversation, right? You don't want to go back and forth about it. You don't want to argue about it. No, sorry, can't do it. Okay, can't help you on this in this particular case. Now, it doesn't mean you can't have, because now you're going to, after giving this refusal, this negative message, you're going to want to build goodwill, right? So it doesn't mean you can't have some alternatives or compromises, right? So you might say, oh, but you know what? Susan has an extra car, and I know she's lent it out to friends before. Try reaching out to her, right? Or, there's a great rental place near my house and it's super inexpensive. So you should try reaching out to them, right? So you're giving some alternatives or compromises, right? Giving sort of some hope to the person who just received the negative news, right? And then finally, forward looking statement, right? So, hey, looking forward to catching up with you at the cottage this weekend. It's going to be a great party for, buddy's birthday, something like that, right? So finish with positive, meaning like, hey, you're looking forward in the relationship with this person, you're looking ahead, right? There's some good things to look forward to. It's just this one particular incidence where there was a refusal, right? It was a no. Okay, so now what about the subject line when you're going to say no to someone, right? If you think your reader may ignore your email, like they're not good with email, you might want to put some negative wording in the subject line. So it might be like vehicle not available, right? Something like that, right? But if you think they'll read it, try to keep it as neutral as possible, right? You can say borrowing my car, right? Something like that. So make it relevant, right? And oh yeah, and also you could try to focus on solutions, right? So car rental agencies is another way to do it, right? So you don't want to be overly negative unless you feel like you have to. Okay, so now what about the medium, right? Is it good to write negative messages, or is it better to say them verbally, right? Honestly, it depends on the severity of the message, okay? Obviously, you want to be sensitive, right? And so a lot of times delivering the bad news face to face, it's not fun to do, right? But it's something that is more impactful. If you can deliver it face to face, it's better, okay? Give people the chance to respond if they need to. But now, if it's something like, sorry, I can't lend you my car, I think a written message is okay. If it's something serious like you're being laid off, right? Like you're losing your job, that's definitely not something to put in writing, right? We sit down face to face and we have a conversation about it. So it depends on the severity of the bad news. Okay, there's another type of message, persuasive messages, right? And when we say persuasive, we're thinking about convincing, right? Convincing someone to do something. So really engaging your audience here, right? Now, how do we engage our audience and persuade them? They got to believe in you, right? You got to have credibility. You got to be trustworthy. You got to evoke a little bit of emotion, put a little bit of passion in there, make people feel good in some way, right? And it's got to be logical, right? It's got to make sense. Like if you're going to try to convince someone to do something, it's got to be in their interest somehow to do it, right? To take the action you're asking them to take. Okay. So the goal, obviously, primarily, is to have the reader take that action that you want, right? And give them enough information so that they know like what they need to do, right? And of course, you want to maintain goodwill, make a good impression, keep, stick to your brand and all of those things, keep it professional and so on. Okay, so when you expect someone to say yes, just make the direct request. Make it direct, almost like positive messaging, right? Just come right out and say it, right? Let's see. What do I need you? Everybody come to my office this afternoon to pick up their $50 gift cards. Well, you don't need a lot of convincing for that. You do want them to come get them, right? So you're trying to persuade them to come get them, but you can just come right out and say it and people will come run over and get their gift cards, right? And so this is an easy one, and this just requires a direct message. No real complicated structure to it. Just come right out and say this, okay? Ask right away for what you want, right? Give the readers the information that they need. So everybody come to my office to get your gift cards. I'm going to be available from 1 to 3, right? Those are the details, right? Those are the times when I'm not in meetings or something like that, right? And then make sure you check the file and pick it out by, find your name by alphabetical order, okay? So just come right out and ask it. It's very straightforward. Okay. Now, if we expect people to be more resistant to our request, okay, it's going to be harder to persuade them. Now we got to use a little more finesse, right? It's just like our negative messaging. We have to have a little more structure here, right? So now we got to be indirect, right? If someone, let's say, what could our request be? You've got to return your keys to the coffee room. Okay, everybody's got a key to the coffee room. We need to return them. Now you can only go into the coffee room with special permission. Nobody wants that, right? That's not fun. So you want them to do it. You want to convince them. You want to persuade them to do it, but they kind of don't want to do it, right? So now we got to be a little bit less direct. Okay. So now here comes the structure, right? Just like our negative messaging. First of all, there's got to be a shared problem communicated. Okay. The coffee room has been a problem because we've had a lot of items go missing in there, right? And employees and managers and staff and so on have lost their things. So there's a shared problem. Oops, sorry. Okay. That's a shared problem, common problem, right? The details, okay? So because we've had too many people going in, we can't keep track of who's going into the coffee room. The solution is, we're going to limit access, okay? We've got to limit the access to the coffee room. What does that mean? Well, I'm sorry, everybody, you got to hand in your keys, okay? The benefit is your things can be stored in there. You won't lose them because it's going to be locked up now. Please come to my office and return your key, okay? So there's our structure. There's our order of things for an indirect request when we have a persuasive message that we're sending that we expect there to be some resistance for. Okay. Okay. Subject lines for a direct request. Just get right to the point, right? Gift cards available, right? That's a direct one. Indirect one, keep it more vague, but be focused on the topic. So coffee room keys, okay? It's not positive, it's not negative, and it's topical, right? It's on point with the topic, okay? Okay, so those were the different sort of types of messages and how to construct them. Now we'll talk about the approach, tone, the voice, and then we'll get a little bit into reader benefits again, okay? So when we talk about approach, we've touched on this already. We talk about an indirect versus a direct approach, right? And direct approach, as you know, use it for more positive messaging. You start out with the main idea and then just explain it afterwards, right? Indirect, usually associated with more negative messaging, right? Use evidence to build up to your point, then make your point, okay? And when do we use them? Well, there's like this line right here that says, people are indifferent to your message. This is if like nobody cares one way or the other. You're changing offices from like 2 doors down, right? Who cares? Very neutral. The more along this spectrum, this continuum, the more eager and happy your audience is to receiving your message, the more direct you can be, right? So I'm going to give you my house. That's pretty good, right? That's a pretty good deal. Everybody wants a house, right? You can just come right out and say that, right? Now, on the other side of this spectrum, of this continuum, we have people being unwilling, right? Unwilling to receive your message, not happy to get your message. On this end of the spectrum, it's, I'm sorry, but you don't have your job anymore. Oof, that's way out on the end of the spectrum, right? And then, so the more unwilling the audience is to hear your message, the more indirect we need to be. Okay, so make sure we use those things appropriately. Okay, let's get into conversational tone a little bit. This is interesting stuff. Obviously, there's a difference between texting and writing. Texting your buddies and writing an email to your prof, right? We can use much more casual language, acronyms, emojis, and stuff when we're text messaging and writing instant messages to our friends. It's not considered professional writing, so don't use that in your emails, right? This is one that I think people are adapting to, is not to use overly formal language, okay? So when I started my career, people would be really formal in emails, right? Please find attached. Uh, please be advised that. Do not hesitate to. So for example, saying, do not hesitate to contact me should you have any questions. I mean, it sounds professional, but it's too much, right? So please contact me if excuse me, if you have any questions. It's straightforward, right? Be more straightforward, because people get so many emails now that they want to get your message in as few words as possible, right? Okay, so avoid overly formal language. Avoid bragging, right? Try not to make yourself seem like a know-it-all. Look at me, I'm the best. If your performance has been good, people will know it, okay? So don't brag, don't preach, okay? Be very careful with intimacy, okay? Getting personal with people. A lot of times, it's just, you know, a personable approach. Some of us, I tend to have a pretty personable approach. I tell people about my life and my family. I don't keep it all business all the time, right? But we do have to be careful not to send the wrong message, right? Not to say, hey, we're friends first and colleagues later. Well, not everybody's going to feel that way, right? Sure, some work relationships are wonderful, positive work relationships, but just make sure you're managing this idea appropriately and that you're speaking in terms that other people understand. And then always, we got to be careful with humor. And this is a tricky one. I always find it's tricky because I like to laugh, right? I like to make jokes and I like to have casual conversations with people, but you do have to be careful with the types of jokes that you make, because it can backfire, right? Especially when we have formal messaging, formal emails, written communications, it doesn't translate so well. Also across cultural boundaries. Now, so many of our organizations are international, multinational companies. Something that might be funny in, I don't know, India is maybe not funny in China, right? So we have to understand the context for all of that. So I encourage people to be positive and laugh and use humor appropriately, but just to be careful that, we're making sure we're not being offensive to anybody when we're trying to make some jokes. Okay? Just things to be careful of when we're talking about conversational tone. Okay, I'm going to read you 3 scenarios here. 3 different ways of saying the same thing. And, I'd like you to sort of see which one is maybe the best, okay? So we're talking about sort of the formality of language here, okay? So here's one. Dear Ms. Navarro, enclosed, please find the information that was requested during our telephone communication of May 14th. As was mentioned at that time, Metro Clinic has significantly more doctors of exceptional quality than any other health facility in the province. As you were also informed, locations throughout the province. In the event that you should need a specialist, you may certainly contact me during regular business hours. Most sincerely yours, Samuel G. Barrett. Okay, lots of words. Okay, let's look at scenario 2. Dear Ms. Navarro, here's the information you requested during our phone conversation on Friday. As I mentioned, Metro Clinic has the highest rated doctors and more of them than any other clinic in the province. In addition, we have a vast network of doctors and other health professionals with offices throughout the province. Goes on to say, if you would like more information, please call anytime between 9 and 5, Monday through Friday. Sincerely, Sam Berens. Okay, so less language, less big words, more direct, more white space on the page, right? More spaced out communications. Here's another one. Sam Berens, here's the 411 you requested. In my humble opinion, IMHO, we have more and better doctors than any other clinic in the province. FYI, we also have a large group of doctors and other health professionals with offices close to you at work home. If you need a specialist, they'll refer you to the right one. Any questions, just ring or message. Later. Yes. Okay. So my point here in showing you these three scenarios is that this is way too informal. This is maybe how some of you text each other. I don't know. Some people maybe text each other like this, right? With their friends and that kind of thing. Very informal language. That's okay if you're talking to a friend, but not appropriate for work. And then going back to this first one, this is like reading an essay and there's all this formal language. You're just trying to share some information about a doctor's office, right? Don't make it like reading Shakespeare, okay? This is the happy medium. Professional, polite, right? Gives all the details. It's complete, all the details that you want, right? But not overly formal and, not informal either. Okay. So hopefully that makes sense. Another thing to think about is using an active voice, right? So we can be active or passive. And like 99% of the time, the active voice is better. Okay. So this affects the tone of your message. Okay. And when we're saying active, we're saying that it's the subject that is performing the action to the object. The object is the one that receives the action. So as an example, Jody is the subject, sent the email message. That's the object, right? So Jody did the thing to the email, right? Jody sent the email message. That is active. Jody did it, right? A passive voice is when the subject receives the action from the object. So the email was sent by Jody. You see the difference there? The email did the thing by Jody, as opposed to Jody did the thing to the email. So they're both acceptable ways of saying it, but one just sounds a lot better. One sounds a lot more sort of in control, and that's the active voice, the first example I read you guys, okay? It makes things more direct, easier to read, less confusing. Both are grammatically okay, but you're using fewer words generally, and easier to understand with the active voice, okay? There's maybe the odd case where the passive voice would be better. So let's say Jody's your friend and the email that Jody sent was some incorrect information to a client. So you're trying to reduce the impact of what Jody did, right? Well, that's one way to do it, is to be indirect in the messaging, okay? Okay, getting on to receiver benefits. So we touched on this a little earlier. You really want to highlight, what's in it for the reader, right? When you're writing something. So the warranty starts working for you immediately, right? The warranty is doing something for you. So you're cultivating this you idea in your message, okay? Try to be sensitive to race, gender, disability, age, so on, right? Try to make your messages universal, okay? All right, I'm going to give you some examples of how you can position things to make them sort of receiver focused, reader benefits focused, okay? So sender focused way of saying something. This is when, if I'm writing you a message and it's all about me, okay? We require all departmental staff to complete and submit these forms in order to comply with our new company policy. Well, that's not so exciting for the reader. So you're telling me that you need something from me and I got to fill out some forms now. Well, boo, not exciting, right? What if we said it like this? Please complete these forms so that you will be eligible for health and dental benefits. Oh, now it makes sense. Now, okay, maybe I don't love filling in forms, right? Nobody likes to do lots of paperwork, but this is important stuff, right? I got to do this paperwork so that I can get my benefits for health and dental, right? So of course I'm going to do that. So you're saying the same thing, right? But you're highlighting what is in it for the reader in our second example. Okay, let's try again. Try another message here. Okay, because we need to clear some space for our new incoming inventory, we will be holding a massive sale. Now, this is sender-focused messaging again. Doesn't really highlight any benefits for the reader. It's just all about me, right? We in this case. Okay, but you could say it this way. You can buy an entire year's supply worth of stock during our massive sale. All right, now I'm getting it, okay? So yeah, of course I want to check out this massive sale. I'm going to get some great deals, but you've positioned it in a way that the receiver, the reader understands what is in it for them, okay? Okay, a few other scenarios here in terms of like conversational tone, positive, negative messaging, how we want to deliver our messages, okay? So let's say you're asking your boss to go to a conference, okay? Now, the conference is going to take you out of the office, obviously. So there's a negative side to it, but you know, it's great career development experience, right? So who am I sending it to? My boss. Should it be formal? Yes, if it's a message to my boss, right? Good news, bad news? Well, mostly good news, but there's maybe a bad piece to it, right? Because you'll be missing some time from work. Can I be direct? I would say yes, because it's generally pretty good, right? And then let's focus on the main idea. I got to go to this conference, right? Active voice. Stick with the active voice, okay? So how can I say it? One or two sentences, keep it as short as possible. I would like to attend the Business Council of Canada conference in Ottawa from March 10th to March 13th. Would there be any issue with my absence from the office during this time, right? So you kind of built up a little bit of this negative piece to it, but you come right out and say, hey, I want to do this thing that'll help me with my career. Okay, your boss should be supportive of that. Okay, another one. You're writing to inform everyone in the department that they will be permitted to wear business casual clothes on Fridays. So you don't have to be so formal on Fridays. Yay, that's good news, right? That's about as easy as it gets, right? Oops, sorry, I backed up there. So in this case, you're sending out a note to the department, right? I'm pleased to announce that the department employees are now permitted to wear business casual clothes to the office on Fridays. That's it. Case closed. Very direct, to the point, one sentence, everybody's happy, right? That's the easiest message to deliver, right? A good news message that doesn't require much explanation. Okay, now, in this case, you work at ABC Business Group, right? And there's a customer who's angry with you. They want a refund because they bought some business cards that were lost in the mail. So they never received them, okay? So you will be, your message to them is that, yes, you will be getting your $50 refund. We're sending the check within 3 days by mail, okay? So customer's angry, but you're kind of delivering some good news, right? So a little bit of context, right? A little buildup. Please accept my apology on behalf of the person that I'm replacing here and, you know, our business group in general. The business cards were lost in the mail. So you're giving some explanation for the negative piece to this, right? It's like the reason you didn't get it is the mail service lost. It wasn't our fault, it was the mail. I will be granting the refund of $50 you requested by check. It'll be sent within 3 days, right? So super straightforward. Another one, you met someone at a home show in Toronto. They're from Montreal. Oh, no, sorry. Sorry, you were in Toronto. There's a distributor that sells these blankets, and you met them at the home show in Montreal, right? And you want to order 25 of these. All right. Again, pretty good news, I'd say, right? So you give some context. You may recall we met at the Fall Home Show in Montreal. I would like to order 25 cashmere and wool blankets for my brand new store. Decorium Homium. All right, that's your new store. These are pretty straightforward scenarios, but good to have examples of how you can structure some very brief messaging, right? Okay, this one's a little trickier. So there's this customer, Misty Fazzulo. She was at the Concord Hotel for 3 nights downtown Toronto. And when she was there, she seemed quite happy with her room and the food and the staff. And really, the staff actually remember her being quite, you know, kind and grateful during her time there. But she's requested a refund, right? So you're going to decline this. You're going to say, you know, there was no complaint. There was nothing bad happen. You can't just ask for your money back after services have been rendered, right? So now this is a lot more sensitive. You're going to say no to someone. You're delivering bad news. So how do we do that? We're less direct, right? Dear Misty Fazzulo, it is my understanding that during your stay with us at the Concord Hotel, you did not address any deficiencies in the hotel's services with our staff. Okay, so you're explaining like you didn't try to solve any issues. There were no issues that you brought up to us. The staff of the Concord can recall your gracious appreciation during your stay. So you were very happy while you were here, right? As such, we must regretfully decline your request for reimbursement. So you see how we built up to the no? We built up to the negative piece of the message there. No, you're not getting your refund, but we're giving it to you in a softer way than how we deliver good news. Okay, here's our last topic of this week's lecture. We're going to talk about email, the good, the bad, and the ugly, okay? So email has been around for a long time now, and it really is here to stay. You know, it works across platforms, it works across countries, it works with one-on-one communication, and it works with, you know, huge international groups, right? It's the main medium through which, you know, most companies around the world are communicating, okay? Hugely fast, efficient. It's also useful because you don't necessarily need to respond right away, right? You have time to think about it, right? And so, you know, there are plenty of alternatives, instant messaging and so on, but email's got, you know, I think a place to stay, that's for sure. Yin and yang, right? Good and bad. Let's see. It's universal. That's a good thing. People use it too freely, right? So some people email you 10 times a day. It's too much. It's easy to use. Is it too easy to use? Maybe. That's why you're getting 100 emails a day. You can access all kinds of groups of different sizes. Unfortunately, a lot of low value messages come your way. So there's a lot of stuff that lands in your inbox that you don't need to see, right? It's fast, but it's not instant, right? Which is a good thing. You can think about it before responding, right? Sometimes you got to dig through a long message chain, a long conversation before you get to the point you're looking for. Okay, so it's you know, a step above personal communications, right? So this is important for you guys as you go off into the work world. You're going to be expected to communicate clearly and write good quality emails, right? It can look bad on you if your tone is too informal, okay? And sometimes, you know, emails that you write could come up in the future if a problem arises. So you really need to be careful and mindful about how you construct your emails, okay? Subject lines, as we touched on, very important. It's going to make the reader decide whether they want to read your email or not, right? So you don't have to, you know, tell the whole story of your email in your subject line, but you do want to build interest. You want to convince someone to open it up and read your mail, right? So here's an example. You could be super descriptive and just say, July sales results. Okay, I might read that, I might not. It depends on if I have time, right? That is what's in the message, right? But what if I said, July sales results, good news and bad news? Now I'm starting to pique the reader's interest because, you know, they might be thinking like, oh, did one area of the business do really well and one area do poorly, right? Well, maybe I should look at this, okay? Oops, okay. And that's it. That's our email section, and that is our lecture for the day. So thank you so much for your attention. Looking forward to catching up with you again next week. Take care, everybody. Bye for now.